We're going to be right back into the swing of a seller's market again, where there's going to be less inventory and more competition, and you wish you probably would have bought something now that had appreciated by then. So
you're listening to Alternative Investor Mastermind, where we do a deep dive on alternative investment opportunities and the lifestyle it can create. Join Jack Krupe as he presents actionable tips and tricks in doing passive real estate away from mainstream strategies. Go beyond the usual fix and flips and try less explored yet rewarding investing ventures. From multifamily properties, mobile homes to cryptocurrencies. Do not miss this opportunity to escape traditional assets and finally create wealth without Wall Street. Now your host, Jack.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Alternative Investor Mastermind. I'm your host, Jack Krupe, and today we've got a special guest today, Zach Lemaster from Renter Retirement. Zach, thanks for joining us.
Hey Jack, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you on, and you've got an interesting topic that we haven't covered on the show before. So you focus on turnkey rental properties. Is that right?
Yeah. So, our business has evolved quite a bit over time. I'm happy to talk about my background as well, but the business aspect, yes, Renter Retirement. At this point, we're the nation's leading turnkey provider for investment properties, where we're helping people actually build their own portfolio of rental properties, regardless if they're a newer investor, if they're accredited or not, whether they're having multiple projects going on, they're just looking for additional tax benefits. So we identify the best locations throughout the U.S. where we maximize cash flow, appreciation, and immediate equity. We build our teams in those areas where we can offer everything from property management, lending, insurance services. We offer a comprehensive business plan where people can come in and buy investment properties and actually own them in some of the best markets throughout the U.S. without having to actually physically manage the properties, as we're handling everything for them.
That's great. You mentioned your background. I think that's always helpful to have, and I'm always super curious about it. I think more people need to be involved in alternative investments. I think too many people have too much of their wealth tied to stocks and bonds and the traditional financial system. So, let's take a step back and just tell us your story and how you got involved in the real estate business.
Sure, I'd be happy to. I'll try to give you as much of a Cliff Notes version as I can, but I think a lot of us that find ourselves in the full-time, investment business didn't necessarily start there or come into the business with that idea. Often we come from other backgrounds. So I actually have a background in healthcare. My wife and I are both optometrists by education. Went to school in Oregon. That's where we met. I was on scholarship with the Air Force, so after school I went into the Air Force, commissioned as a captain, and practiced for 7 years in the Air Force as an optometrist. Then we moved out to Colorado, where we're still at, just north of Denver, and we were in private practice for a while, but then eventually transitioned into full-time real estate. But during that entire time in our professional career, like my first year as a young captain in the Air Force, I bought my first rental property, Jack, and that was just a duplex house hacked it and rented out half, lived in the other half, and got the bug, right? I think I'm very intentional and very specific investing in real estate only. I'm well diversified within real estate, but I don't do a lot of investing outside of real estate because frankly, it's just something that I understand, and it's a tangible asset, right? And I think once you understand all the tax benefits and things like that, it's really a phenomenal asset class. But eventually, we were able to start investing in different locations. My wife and I, we were able to invest intentionally on where we saw the best opportunity, not just invest in our local backyard because that's what we knew and felt comfortable with. That led us to the point where we were able to retire from our career paths early on in life. As optometrists, we still practice, because we still love helping people see. We never wanted to exit that because we didn't like it. It's just that real estate had a different path for us. And now at this point, we had a lot of friends and family and colleagues that were coming to us saying, hey, we want to invest with you. We want to own real estate. We want to, we see what you guys are doing, but we don't have the time, the energy, the know-how. Can you help us? Right. And so that was kind of the foundation of Renter Retirement. Fast forward to today, we're across 12 different markets in the Midwest and Southeast. We do about 1,000 doors a year. And so that's a combination of single family and multifamily. We do some commercial and new development projects. We were talking about build to rent, and the rest is history. So
that's great, and it's great that you were able to use that to reclaim some of your time. And now that you do practice, it's only because you actually want to, but you're not tied to the golden handcuffs, if you will. And it's a great service to provide. It's very adjacent to the syndication space. I think it's a lot of the same
A lot of people have seen that in the ugly side, right, of real estate, of trying to be a landlord or bought a property, even maybe a turnkey property, as we talked about previously, and a bad location or with not the right team, right, and they get a bad taste in their mouth. But yeah, it's all about scalability. To your point, like if you're just trying to diversify, that's fantastic. There's 1,000 different ways to invest in real estate. More on the passive side would be obviously syndications, which in my opinion would be much more passive than physically owning an asset. We talk about passive income. My opinion, Jack, is that there is no such thing as like full passive income, because you always need to be managing your property managers. You need to be managing your money, right? Like even if you don't have control of it, you just got to be conscious about how the deal is performing and things like that. You just need to be aware, not blindly turning your money over to someone. But yeah, I mean, real estate, it's a scalable game. So, I mean, this is an arena where you can create, financial independence and lifetime generational wealth within, it doesn't take a lifetime to build it, but you got to be intentional on where you're buying and who you're working with, right? So.
Great. Well, I want to touch on a couple of the traditional turnkey markets, and I do want to go to build to rent. But I guess first off, I'm curious on in the markets. You said you're in 12 different markets, but maybe you could just highlight one or two of the markets and some of the criteria that makes for a good fit for the type of turnkey rental that you guys will purchase and or offer to the community.
Sure. So I'll start on a macroeconomic kind of like looking at the market as a whole. We generally want to be in areas that are going to set us up for success long term. And there's a lot of things we want to look at. So we want to be in areas that have landlord-friendly legislation, low taxes, future population and economic growth, a diversity of industries, not just a area that's, say, reliant on oil or gas or something like this, which could be a boom-bust market. We want to be in areas where we see an undersupply of housing and a strong demand. This is obviously going to keep the house rented, allow for appreciation both in rents and market value. We want to be in an area where you have high rent ranges relative to home prices, so you can actually have positive cash flow. I mean, we want to be in areas where you can have cash flow and appreciation and sometimes have immediate equity when you enter into them. So that brings us to two general locations, like geographic locations, as the Midwest and Southeast. Midwest, we typically, that's your like bread and butter, B class, 1950 to 1970s house has been renovated, 3.2, 4.2, whatever the case is, and it's just producing a nice, 10 or 15% cash on cash return if you're using leverage or whatever. And it's just your bread and butter rental that's going to be a stable cash flow market. Now compare that to the Southeast. Well, let me say this: Midwest, typical price points, $150,000, $200,000 for average house, right? And so that's kind of your general marketplace that you're looking at. The other area we're really active in is the Southeast, and that's a little bit more of a growth market. A lot of that is, pretty much exclusively we work in the Southeast with new construction, the build to rent stuff. Average price point there could be $300,000, $320,000. This is a brand new built house that, may have less cash flow initially on the pro forma analysis just because it's a little bit higher price point, but obviously you're going to have less maintenance. You're likely going to have less tenant turnover, better tenant quality. Certainly, you're going to have better appreciation in those markets, both in rents and prices over time. And sometimes, especially right now with where we're at in the market cycle, you can buy build to rent with immediate equity coming into them, give you that kickstart. So those are kind of the two general locations between like single family or small multifamily property that we're focusing on.
So I've seen build to rent more from the syndication front because our core business is we'll co-invest into syndications. We end up a general partner or co-general partner in the deal. So I've seen them where it's an entire community or half the community where maybe half gets sold to DR Horton and the other half are basically built and gonna be rentals, but inside a cul-de-sac. Are you buying some of those where, it's a planned community and you're picking up a few of them, or are you part of the construction side as well and equity investor in that, and then working to sell them off and help manage them for your investors? Where do you fit into that?
We'll typically play the developer and managerial role where we'll hire in builders in the area that we see there's opportunity. And more often than not, it's less community development. And although we do have some communities, that might be 50 to 100 tract homes or something like that, or depending on the location. But a lot of times it's infill. A perfect example would be in the southeast, like in southwest Florida is an area, or central Florida, where we're really active. Also, that corridor between Birmingham and Huntsville in Alabama, that's another area we build quite a bit. These would be in primary or secondary markets where we see a lot of new jobs being developed, but there's still quite a bit of land availability, and they're pre-platted out. A perfect example would be, say, like in Cape Coral or Fort Myers or Lehigh Acres, where we're really active. There's quite a bit of pre-parceled lots that already have, some of them are well and septic, or some of them have utilities already, and you can just buy the land as an individual parcel and then do the build to rent thing. That's average house price point could be $300,000, it still rents out at $2,600 a month in a upper B class or lower A class area. All things considered, and that's a growing area. Florida had a 2% population growth this last year. That's more than any state. Actually, Florida beat out Texas for the first time for many years. But that's an area where we see strong appreciation. But that is, in those type of areas, it makes it very accessible for like the average investor to come in and just buy one single family, a handful of single family, maybe some duplexes where they don't have to be part of this community. We don't have to worry about HOAs. They don't have to participate in the whole development.
That's great. And I think it just takes advantage of a lot of the demographics right now. There's so many baby boomers retiring, moving from the Northeast. People are, and so often don't want to buy. If you're just moving, sometimes you're not sure if you want to be in Fort Myers, Cape Coral, Delray Beach on the other side. So I know a lot of people that move that have rented for a few years just to figure out, these are, A+ type renters that, just want a cheaper place to avoid the high property taxes of the Northeast or the People's Republic of California, and just find a rental. And then there's a whole generation of people that are priced out of buying right now as well. We see that on the multifamily side as well. When rates are at 7%, you've got quality renters who just 3 years ago might have bought a house, but now probably won't afford it for a number of years.
That's a huge point. I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, because we really focus on one thing that served us well over time is being below the median house price point, like at or below, especially for that area. So average house price is $430,000, I think, nationally or whatever, but like geographically, it's still around Southwest Florida is $400,000. So when we can be below that price point in a kind of starter house or maybe an 1,800 square foot 4-bedroom 2-bath house that's still below the median house price point, it's going to have the highest demand for both resale and for renters, because to your point, exactly, if you're in the upper echelon of the $800 million houses and all of a sudden interest rates go through a dramatic increase like we just saw, right? A lot of those buyers may be priced out of the market, but they still could be buyers at that lower price point. But also, if they're not buyers, they're renters. So it's just, we have an immense amount of demand for people in that area, but it's still high enough rent in an area where you still have demand, but it's also going to be a quality person. Like, these are not low income rentals. These are nice areas that do have a lot of demand for both resale and rental. But yeah, interesting times with how the market is evolving.
Great. Let's pivot to tax a little bit. We talk a lot about tax. Part of my origin story was, being stuck in New York, paying a 50% tax rate and engineering my life through moving to Puerto Rico. Not everyone could go all the way to Puerto Rico, but, a lot of people, that have rental portfolios focus a lot on depreciation. I know what it looks like from these larger multifamily syndications, but I am curious on a single family house, what it looks like for one of the kind of Midwestern ones, and also what it is for a new construction. Are you able to still do a cost segregation? And what could it look like from a depreciation perspective?
Yeah, new construction in general. Obviously both houses have depreciation, right? Just that's standard. So you get your normal depreciation. You're required by the IRS to take normal depreciation, which obviously has its benefits. New construction in general, if you run an accelerated depreciation with a cost seg, generally speaking, new construction tends to fare better. It gives you more of that bonus depreciation. I think, and there's some areas where we provide cost seg studies for individual investors if that's part of their tax plan. There's some people that are buy these properties all cash because they're going through like a 1031 exchange or something like that, and they're going to have they're going to have taxable income still because they don't have any leverage. And so even after normal depreciation, so they may want to run accelerated depreciation to offset their taxable income. Or if it's a real estate professional that's trying to offset income from other sources, we have a lot of spouse teams where, one person may be a professional and then one person is a real estate professional, and they're able to offset their tax. I mean, I could probably spend all day talking about this because this is like our soul, just personally, this is our soul, like the biggest thing, like tax, accelerated depreciation with cost segs. This is a big thing right now. We have a lot of people that are full-time real estate professionals, some big names out there. For example, like Pace Marby, he's one of our big investors that comes in and buys real estate. So turnkey, build to rent specifically. So he has extra tax benefits because he can't acquire enough real estate to, offset his taxable income. So that was a long answer to say, yes, absolutely, you can do accelerated depreciation on them. And new construction, or in particular, I think usually our cost segs are running in between, like, land's very minimal. Land's like $10,000. So, it's like less than 5% of the improvement value. But we're usually seeing our studies come in between, I'd say 33 to 38% on average. So,
that's amazing. And then if you do finance at, say, 75% or even 70, a conservative loan to value, that could actually work out to 100% on invested capital.
I mean, we could go down a rabbit hole with this where it's like, in a lot of cases, we get a higher than 100% return on investment just from the depreciation, where it's like you're saving more on taxes than you would pay, or you're saving more on taxes than you would pay as your down payment. It's crazy because we also, Jack, have some unique financing options in light of, just where interest rates are at right now. We have loan options where we will do seller financing at 2.99%. That's an interest-only loan for anywhere from 2 to 4 years. So that's an area where someone can come in and, because most people are probably going to refinance. If you're taking out 30-year leverage right now, or any leverage for that matter, to buy property, you're likely going to be refinancing probably if you're not selling within a 2 to 4 year period, just with where we anticipate rates. So someone could come in and with a 2.99% seller finance interest-only loan and save $8,000 of tax, or $8,000 of just interest you'd pay annually, and then make that into cash flow and then refi. We also have investor loans where you can put as little as 5% down. And so people that are doing the cost seg study, they'll buy a property with 5% down. It may be break even or negative cash flow if you're only 5% down, but then you're getting that, you're like triple digit, or just the ROI on that is just dramatic. So anyways, lots of cool things to explore. Yeah,
that's really cool. And also just, generally seller financing has so many less fees. Any traditional mortgage lender, there's just, there could be a few $1,000s of just junk fees added on there. I'd imagine the fees are probably more reasonable in that scenario as well, and the less friction towards the closing process.
It's like less than 1%, like total loan costs. You know what I mean? So we're making our money on building the houses and liquidating them. It's not the loan structure. So, yeah.
Gotcha. And then you're just there's no senior debt on there, so you're allowed to just finance, or are you kind of doing a wraparound with some type of construction loan that you guys have?
So with the seller financing, this is a first position. They are actually buying it. It's 25% down, and it's the only loan structure. And so this is either us owning it free and clear and offering that, or paying off the construction financing that's on it. That's why it makes sense for us, right? Is that we can actually free up our books, and on the balance sheet now we have an asset versus a liability. But we can still exit a deal where, we used to sell to a lot of funds and have a lot of institutional money that, quite frankly, has really slowed down over this past year. So it's, that's why we're working a lot more with individual investors.
Yeah, I was in the non-performing mortgage space, and we bought and sold a lot of performing paper as well, and got a decent familiarity with the seller finance. And there used to be a huge demand. When rates were at zero, a lot of the seller financing was at higher rates for the people that were having a hard time qualifying. But it's almost the inverse here: a lower rate to a very qualified buyer, just to kind of grease the wheels and get things moving. Just give them the time to shop rates, and hopefully it seems like rates may be higher for a slightly longer time. But at some point, what does the government say? Don't let a crisis go to waste. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. When something will probably happen in the next couple of years, statistically, that probably sends a shock to the system, and hopefully rates move at that point.
And we got elections coming up too, and there's things like that. So yeah, I mean, the Feds have already kind of said that into 2024, like, likely we're going to be in a better rate scenario. And I think we're at the kind of the pivotal point. But if you think about it and run the math, if you're taking out a third, and this is for any property you're buying with any financing, I mean, shoot, if you look at an amortization schedule of a 30-year fixed loan at 7.5% interest rate or whatever it is, like, you're paying an insane amount of interest. It's pretty much an interest only loan, right? I mean, you're paying such little principal with how high those rates are, and you're likely going to refinance within I would say 2 to 5 year period, then why even put long-term debt and pay all those closing costs in it? So we like to be conscious of where the market is and like what kind of things make sense for investors now, and how can we help them accomplish their goals in spite of, instead of just sitting on the sidelines going, man, the interest rates suck and everything sucks, and so.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. I talk a lot about just staying in the market and the dollar cost averaging examples of just, continuing to invest. There's opportunities out there now that, 2 years ago, we're, at least on my side of the business, we're buying properties $8 million cheaper than they might have been offered for 2 years ago. I don't know, I think South Florida is probably one of the most immune market, as is the Midwest. It sounds like you're not really in boom bust areas, and the single family housing market's been way more resilient just because there's minimal supply.
We're still seeing double-digit appreciation in Southwest Florida. It's just crazy, and that's purely supply and demand. I mean, in the construction industry has also just been a little bit of a nightmare, just with permitting issues, and we've had a hurricane this last year that came through. Which, by the way, that's a big question. I should probably talk about that. Everyone asks about investing in Florida. What about hurricanes and flooding? Well, we don't invest in flood zones. We have not seen skyrocket insurance like a lot of people think is happening just, all across the state and the country. I mean, we still have reasonable insurance. For example, that $300,000 house, the average insurance policy is $1,100 annually. Again, that's not in flood zones. And we just saw a large, Category 4 hurricane that came through a year ago in Southwest Florida. We had 1,000 properties under construction at that point in time. We needed insurance claims on 2, and that was just roof related. But like they're concrete block built houses meant to withstand 150 mile per hour winds. So my point is just to understand the dynamics of where you're investing, and there's opportunity in a lot of these areas. But yeah, supply and demand, like construction cannot keep up with the amount of people moving to this area. There's over 1,400 people a day moving to Florida as a whole, and it's just there's no way there's going to be enough housing solutions for them. So generally speaking, that's an area where you can feel pretty safe that both, especially below that median house price point where you don't have less fluctuation, you're going to have a lot of demand for resale and especially renters.
That's great to hear on insurance, because I've definitely been seeing that on the multifamily side where some of the policies are doubling compared to where the prior owner had it. So it's good to see that at least the single family hasn't been hit as hard. And from an inventory perspective, I know Fort Myers did get hit pretty hard, but that means there's less supply out there right now as well. Did you have any issues? Like, were there any properties in Fort Myers that were affected by the hurricane last year?
So the area that was affected the most was Fort Myers Beach, and then Sanibel Island, which is just off of Cape Coral. And those areas, I mean, those are like nice luxury vacation rentals, multi-million-dollar homes, so there was a lot of destruction that happened there. But once you get a little bit inland, like Cape Coral and then Fort Myers and Lehigh Acres, no, there was no, like, there was houses everywhere from just starting construction to fully built houses. We had, out of all the projects we had 2 houses that needed insurance claims. Those happened to be my own personal houses that were on the coast. But they were a little bit more exposed. One was a roof issue that I didn't even actually make the claim on. And the second one was just the block had fallen over on one part of the house. But I mean, that was a Category 4 hurricane that came I came right through Cape Coral, but it just goes to show that the code today for new construction and other benefits for build to rent. Now, because the people that are seeing the worst insurance increases, those are the people that don't have brand new construction built to code. Those are the people that have the older homes. They're like, those are highest risk for issues, or probably have filed the most amount of claims. So that's kind of what we've seen, Jack. But we generally avoid flood zones. We want to be in areas where we have the ability to build it at scale, and meet building standards and codes without issues. So.
That's great. Now, what's the process? Are you sitting on inventory constantly? I'm just thinking in terms of timing. This episode probably drops in a couple of weeks. We'll be, say there's 2 months left in the year and we're going to have Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, a lot of real estate professionals end up procrastinating, where they just, they finally finished their taxes for last year. And now they're like, oh, wow, I made a bunch of money flipping houses, or, my rental income is up. What's the process from sort of getting in touch to looking through possible opportunities to getting to closing?
We always have availability. So at any given point in time, we generally have between 40 to 50 houses available. That could be more or less depending on demand. But and our inventory is publicly available. You can go to renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. Or if you're listening, you can call 800-311-6781. But either whether it's a Midwestern house, again, we have single family, we have small multifamily, build to rent, or whatever the case is, we have availability. It just depends if it fits your goals. We want to have an individual conversation, guys. We don't charge investors anything. We make our money through development and building, right? And so our process is to first, we want to have a conversation with you to learn about your investment goals, criteria, timeline, resources, and then educate you on some of the markets. Even if you don't invest with us, I encourage you to set up a call, because you can learn about some of these new areas that might benefit you in your long-term goals. But we want to match a market and the property to the investor and their goals. And then it's just a matter of going through a regular transaction, putting the house under contract, going through due diligence, having your appraisals and inspections, and then closing on the property. That's probably a 45-day process if you're using financing. You can use whatever lender. We have some excellent lending options for investors, regardless if you're international, if you can't qualify, you need DSCR loans. We have in-house lending, as I mentioned, seller financing. We have low down payment options. But essentially, it's just walking through the process with the investor to make sure we're answering all their questions. We help them map out a business and tax plan, and then execute on it. And there are a lot of people. It's every year like clockwork. We have a lot of people that are like, yeah, it's December 5th or 7th, and man, I need to close on $600,000 worth of real estate before the end of the year. Can we do that? Well, okay, if we do seller finance, or we bring in bridge financing, or obviously for cash, that makes it easy. There is availability is the point. Same thing with 1031s. We have people that will contact us 5 days out from their identification period and say, I need to place all this capital, and which is fine. It's better to contact us prior to that, but there is availability where we can help you execute your plan.
That's great to hear. 'Cause I know I've gotten those same calls as well. And on my side, it's harder to place, because to do a tenant in common structure, there's a lot more moving parts on the multifamily side. And I think you guys can be a good option for, I'm sure I will probably be referring a few people before the end of the year, because I always get those calls as well, as people figure out their depreciation goals for the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I know none of us have a crystal ball, but just macro wise, I'm just curious, what do you think the outlook is for the next year or two?
Man, it's just been such a wild ride over the past 4 years. Would you agree? It's just been an interesting time.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So in every market, I don't want to ever talk about national things right now, because national trends, because I think that really what we're going to see is really going to be geographically dependent. We are seeing a mass exodus from some of these highly taxed and populated areas, like coastal areas, from people moving and also investing and moving money into these places like the Southeast in Florida, where you have no taxable income and affordability, right? And states are business friendly. But I think over the next year, everyone kind of anticipated that we were going to have a lot of housing correction, at least in the single family sector, and we didn't. We just really didn't, right? Maybe some specific areas, and a lot of that is just due to lack of supply. Construction is slow. People had nationally, historically low interest rates that they're holding on to. They're not bringing those houses to the market and selling them. So it's a little bit more of an even playing field right now. I think there's a lot of buying opportunity right now. I do think we're at peak interest rates right now, where as soon as moving into Q1 and Q2 of 2024, even if we see a slight adjustment on interest rates, it will probably open up a lot more investor activity, just because it always does. And that means that there's more competition. We'll probably be back on this trend of, more competition and appreciation. But tax benefits are still very attractive right now for investors, even at 80% of their accelerated depreciation. Next year it drops to 60%. So I guess that's a long way of saying, Jack, that I think now is a really good time to make moves and acquire assets. There's a little bit more availability for inventory. And I would imagine by, mid to mid-late next year, they're going to be right back into the swing of a seller's market again, where there's going to be less inventory and more competition. And you wish you probably would have bought something now that had appreciated by then. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The bear markets never last that long. If you think about, peak to trough in 2007, 8, within 2 years, it was really, I think maybe they said the technical bottom was 2011, but I think I even saw it earlier. And the COVID really, a month, maybe people were scared. And then all of a sudden, prices were going up even when, had a hard time getting inside houses just because so few were available.
And I would still consider this more of a bull market. To be quite honest, there's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of different sectors and specific geographic locations, but there's still a huge discrepancy between supply and demand right now. There is still a less than 6 month available inventory in most of these areas, which would mean it's a seller's market still. The average kind of middle playing ground is about 6 months of available inventory, and we're not seeing that in any market that we operate in. So, it's hard to say, but it's just, yeah, supply and demand is a big thing that drives everything. And we still have an undersupply nationwide in general for housing. And that problem's not fixing itself overnight. So that's again why. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. The difference. Yeah. The inventory difference. It reminds me, Howard Marks, Oak Tree Capital was one of the early movers in 2007, 8 to build a distressed fund. He has a book on market cycles, and he keeps repeating history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And those who think it's going to be exactly the same, inventory, the lack of inventory is the number one difference this time around. And that I think 70% of the population either has a loan below 4% or zero debt at all. I think 30 to 40% of people have houses fully paid off. So that inventory is unlikely to be unlocked unless there's a major life event.
So my advice to anyone on that, Jack, that if you're wondering what to do, you got to do something, right? No one builds wealth by doing nothing. Obviously, you want to take strategic moves, but real estate investing, no matter which asset class you're in or how you're investing, it's a long-term game, right? And it's you mentioned dollar cost averaging, but I think it's just like consistency. I always say consistency over time. Quit looking for these home run deals or trying to time the market, and just make an investment plan and stick to it consistently year after year, and let real estate do what it does. Build wealth, maximize your tax benefits, reinvest your equity, and that's how people build generational wealth in real estate. That's what allowed my wife and I to retire from our career paths as doctors and build a very successful business. But ultimately, if you're investing in areas that are below the median house price point, where you have an undersupply of housing and you can keep the house rented, right? It's all about, don't overcomplicate it. Invest in a good location with the right people and do that consistently, and you will be set up for success. And if you need help with that, identifying the right markets and putting together a plan, reach out to guys like us, right? Reach out to you. We're certainly happy to help anyone if they're interested in acquiring physical assets, and just take action.
That is probably the perfect way to end this podcast. I don't think it could be said any better, and I can't top that. But Zach, thank you so much for coming on the show. And,
Jack, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Do repeat. We'll put it in the show notes, but I think one more time, just give your website, social media, however everyone can get a hold of you.
Yeah, we always plug the website because that's got all our handles to social. We have a great YouTube channel, a great podcast for people to follow, where we just talk about all things real estate and a lot of information we put out there. The website is renttoretirement.com. That's renttoretirement.com. And the 800 number is 800-311-6781. And guys, we're here to help however we can. We got a lot of market data and research and tools that, we're just here. My goal for my team is every person we talk to, we're going to add value to help you become a better investor no matter what you're doing. So we're happy to schedule a call with anybody.
Great. Well, thanks again for coming on, and everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. We have a YouTube channel. We have a Facebook group, Alternative Investor Mastermind. Please join. There's some great conversations going on there, and we'll see you on the next episode.
That's all for this episode of Alternative Investor Mastermind. Now that you know the many alternative opportunities out there, all up for the taking, you can finally become ultra connected and ultra wealthy. Get more valuable advice from the experts by subscribing to the show at alternativeinvestormastermind.com. Become a winner in the world of passive investing today in alternative investment strategies. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.